Throughout the second half of Rundown 8, we've been teetering between helping Schaeffer in his mission to blow up the complex, or disobeying him and finding a way to escape this place and retake our lives. But we've been indecisive for far too long, and I don't know about all of you, but I'd rather not end my existence in this labyrinth of death and decay. Schaeffer once told us long ago that we needed to break free from the system and think for ourselves, and I think it's about time we finally did so. Hello everyone, Professor Scaly here, and welcome to the R8C2 level guide. As always, we're going to be starting off with your loadout, and for this mission, I recommend you bring with you a biotracker, a mine deployer, a C-foam launcher, and a burst sentry. Reason for the biotracker is because in this level, we do have to initiate a blackout at one point, which is going to make it a whole lot more difficult to see the enemies we have to deal with, and there are also going to be a fair amount of shadow strikers and shadow giants in one portion of it, so of course, biotracker to help us out there. As for the mine deploying C-foam launcher, primary means of dealing with a fair amount of the alarms in this level, the classic shut a door, mine it, C-foam it, reinforce it with C-foam during the alarm just to keep enemies out even longer and conserve more of our ammunition, and there will be a few blood doors we have to deal with in this level, so of course mines help out there. And then last but not least, when it comes to that burst sentry, it is to give us a little bit of extra firepower to help out with some of the alarms. There will be a few moments where while mines and C-foam will help us, they can't really cover everything, so of course extra firepower from a sentry helps out tremendously. If you really want to, you could swap out the sentry for a different type. I would say maybe go for a sniper sentry if you want to, just because there are a fair amount of charger and giant chargers in this level. But if you want something that's just universally good in pretty much every situation, burst sentry is always the way to go. Dropping down into level, you'll see that your main objective is even more errors, but just like the previous few levels, this will update as we make our way further into it. So starting off, you and your teammates will be inside zone 265. The data sphere you picked up back in R8B4, that will be with you in the drop down, so make sure you bring it with you. And in this first zone, there aren't going to be any resources whatsoever, but there will be strikers and shooters, as well as even potentially a few chargers you're going to have to make your way through. And as you continue to go through it, you will find a security door under lockdown, but just ignore it and keep on going through further into it. And eventually, you will find the security door to zone 266. This door is going to have a full team scan tied to it. In there, you're going to have a scout patrolling about, a normal one, but there will also be a crawling scout patrolling about. There will be even more enemies, pretty fair amount of them, some of them even being chargers or even giant chargers, so be very cautious of them as they can waste a lot of your ammunition. There are no resources in this zone either, so all you really need to do in here is just sneak your way through, maybe kill some of the enemies here and there, and get into the second room, where in the middle of it, you will be able to find the micro drive extractor, which is where you need to bring that data sphere to. Once you put the data sphere into it, you can just sneak your way out of the zone. Again, you don't have to kill anything in here. Just make your way out, go back into zone 265, and go to that lockdown door you saw from earlier. This one that leads you to zone 267 will now be unlocked and will just have a full team scan tied to it. As for zone 267 itself, in here, even more enemies, most of them going to be regular chargers or giant chargers. There's also a charger scout patrolling about in one of the two rooms, so keep an eye out for him. C-foam launcher can help you deal with him stealthily. And this time around, there will be resources in here, so of course, keep an eye out for them and collect every single one of those resource packs. But once you take care of everything in the zone, you will find a blood door, although this one is under lockdown. So you're going to go to the far northern end to the security door to 268, which is going to have a class 6 alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, there's only one possible spawn location for these enemies, and as long as both of the doors to your room are left shut, enemies are always going to be taking this one right here, so make sure that one is mined and C-foamed. And I would also recommend try to re-C-foam this door a fair amount during the alarm, but don't utilize all of the C-foam launcher. I'd say save enough for about 2 doors, maybe even 3 doors later on, and you should be good. As for your sentry, you can place it down the hallway facing towards the door, and that's about it. Once you're good to go, activate the alarm, finish the scans. I believe this one has a full team scan right at the end, so everybody will have to be alive for it. But once you finish it, you could then move on into zone 268 itself. As for this zone, there's going to be nothing in here, or at least no resources or enemies, but you can find consumables and of course artifacts. But halfway into this room, you will find a table that you can place the micro drive onto. Once you get there, just simply leave that behind, and then you'll also be able to record a message on the machine next to you. So go on ahead and do that. You'll get a little bit of dialogue. then Schaeffer's going to be yelling at you even more, but at that point you could continue further into the level and backtrack to the security door to zone 269. When you get there, just simply place a mine on the door, open it up, and if you want to, you can fall back out of that room past the nearby door, because doing so will make it so that nothing inside of that room, or at least most of the enemies sleeping inside that first room, will not wake up. But throughout zone 269, there will be even more enemies, including giant chargers. Kind of a theme in this level if you haven't noticed it by now, lots of chargers and giant chargers. But there will also be resources to collect. Terminal is about halfway through the zone, so use that to ping every single one of them to figure out where they are, and just keep making your way room by room. Once you get to the far back end of it though, you will find a security door to zone 270, which is going to have a class 7 mixed alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, once again, only one possible spawn location for these enemies, and 2 different doors they have to go through to get to you and your teammates. Now this is a class 7 alarm, it's going to take a while to finish it, so what I like to do is have both of the doors shut. I will C-foam both of them, but I will only place a mine on the door that leads directly into our room. Once you got everything set up though, you can activate the alarm, work on the scans. If you have leftover C-foam, go on ahead and re-C-foam the door that leads into your room once enemies start breaking it down. Sentry as well, you can have that in the room with you facing towards the door. Overall, this alarm isn't all that difficult to deal with, so just do your best to survive. And once you finish it, you can go out there, clear any enemies who are still left, and then you could go back to the security door and activate the checkpoint scan tied to it. Once you finish the checkpoint scan, the door will automatically open up, and I recommend, as it's doing the opening animation, quickly run back out into the previous room beyond that door that broke open during that alarm, because inside zone 270, there's going to be a fair amount of chargers and giant chargers, as well as a tank, and weirdly enough, the tank is the only thing that automatically wakes up. So if none of you are standing in that room next to the open security door when he wakes up, then he's not going to scream as he's 2 rooms away from you. So he's just going to rush you down, and you could just focus on dealing with the tank and not having to worry about any of the chargers whatsoever. Let him come out to you, deal with him in that very big room, plenty of cover, pretty easy to fight him in here. And once he's dead, you can then go into zone 270, look around a bit, just stealthily deal with all the chargers and giant chargers, and grab the resources from in here. And as you make your way through the zone, you also see that there are 4 generators in the middle of it, and now your objective is to remove your control chip, but in order to do so, you need to go and find power cells and bring them back to all 4 of those generators. And of course, none of them are in any of the zones you've been through up to this point. So after you've killed all the enemies inside zone 270 and you grab the resources from in here, you're going to go to the northern end where you're going to find a blood door. This blood door, specifically zone 271, will spawn in regular strikers and shooters, as well as a few regular chargers. And there's going to be a fair amount of enemies sleeping inside that first room, and they will wake up since there's no way you can actually get all the way out of the zone before the blood door fully opens up. So just get ready to shoot quite a bit after the door opens. Having your sentry placed down can help out tremendously, so definitely would recommend it. But deal with all the enemies as they come out to you. Once everything is dead, pack up the sentry and head into there. Everything in the first room should be pulled, so go around here, look for resources and whatnot, and then go into the second room of the zone, clear that out stealthily, grab more resources, and at the back end of it, you will find a security door to zone 272. This door is just going to have a full team scan tied to it, and zone 272 itself is going to have 2 crawling scouts patrolling about and a lot of enemies spread throughout it. Strikers, shooters, hybrids, giant strikers, you name it. There's a lot of them in here. So take your time, just melee kill as many of the enemies as you possibly can as you go throughout here. If you need to go into that second room to grab resources, highly recommend just pull that room if there isn't a scout in there. If there is, just shoot it from a distance with a gun that'll one-shot it and then shut the door and mine it just to conserve some ammunition. But once you've gotten everything from in here, all the resources and the very first power cell, you then are going to go back out into zone 271 as a team, and I recommend you plug your first power cell into one of the 2 generators near the central platform. Reason for this is because when you plug in the first generator, it will initiate a class 4 alarm that will spawn in regular strikers and shooters, as well as a few chargers here and there, and the initial full team scan is right there on the central platform. As you can see with the map overlay, enemies could spawn from the north or from the east, and while there is a door up north we could utilize, I recommend you leave this open as we want to preserve it for later. You can have your sentry facing towards the north or the east, completely up to you and your teammates. But once you finish all the scans, deal with any enemies who are still left alive, and now you're going to head over to the southern security door, specifically the one to zone 273. This is also going to be a blood door, so of course put a mine on it. The first room of the zone can have a fair amount of enemies in it. Sometimes these enemies will consist of nightmares, hybrids, or even giants, so be cautious of that. But same thing as before, place down your sentry, let the mine kill a fair amount of the enemies, shoot and kill the rest with the sentry, and once everything is taken care of, go into the zone, just clear out the rest of the enemies throughout it. There will be more resources in here to collect, as well as a second power cell, which once you find it, you can go on ahead and take it back out to the generator cluster, but do not plug it in quite yet. You're going to want to make sure you get all the resources from inside zone 273 first and resupply with them. And then the 2 doors are tied to the very first room. Highly recommend you go on ahead and leave these open to preserve them for later on. Then once you and your teammates are good to go, plug that power cell into one of the generators. This time I recommend you plug it into one of the ones further away from the central platform, so one of the 2 up above. And once you do that, an error alarm is going to be initiated that spawns in a snatcher as well as a pretty fair amount of enemies. The regular enemies will keep spawning wave after wave, but that one snatcher is the only one. You don't have to worry about multiple of them. The thing is though, you are able to deactivate this error alarm by using a terminal found inside zone 274. So as soon as you plug that power cell in, all of you run down. Once you get into the final room of zone 273, go on ahead, shut that door behind you, mine it, and seafoam it. Then do the full team scan tied to the security door to zone 274. Once you do that, you're then going to want to blitz your way into there. There will be a few regular chargers as well as giant chargers sleeping in the first and the second room. The terminal is always going to be in the second room, so I highly recommend just blast your way through these enemies, get into the second room, kill those enemies quickly, and then go on ahead, put the command to the terminal. This will deactivate it. And there's still a fair amount of enemies left over. You could just hide out in that room, shut it behind you, and just mine it, and maybe place a bit more seafoam on it if you need to, and let the mines do a fair amount of the work for you. But once all the enemies are dead, you can then go on ahead to the security door to zone 277, which is located at the back end of the zone you're currently in, as there are no resources in zone 274 to collect, and do the full team scan that's tied to that security door. Now inside zone 277, you want to take this zone slow and steady because this is just one simple room, and in here will be 2 charger scouts, a fair amount of regular strikers and shooters, and a sleeping tank. Now, how you want to handle this can vary quite a bit depending on exactly where the enemies spawn. In the run I had here, there weren't that many enemies near the entrance, so we just worked together and melee killed them, then waited for a charger scout to get close to melee kill it with a seafoam launcher, and then we just tried to find a good opportunity to kill the second one. If things get really bad, then I would say just try to seafoam one of the charger scouts from a distance, and then shoot the other one real quick with a gun that can one-shot it, maybe a hell rifle to the back or whatever, and then shoot the seafoamed one before it breaks out, and then of course just let all the enemies come up to you. More often than not, you will have to pull this entire room because the power cell you need in here is located at the far back, and there are also resources in here you want to grab before you move on, and trying to melee kill everything in this room and those charger scouts can be quite difficult. Either way though, once you have taken care of everything in here, or if you get really lucky and you can actually sneak your way through and leave a few of the enemies alive, just get the resources, get the power cell, and then backtrack out into zone 271. Once you get here, you then want to plug the 3rd power cell into the other generator that is next to the central platform, because once you do, a blackout is going to occur, a class 3 alarm is going to be initiated, which will only spawn in shadow type enemies, and 2 shadow giants will spawn in the room with you, and I think they always spawn over by that western blood door. So what I like to do is, again, make sure the northern and southern doors are left open. We still want to preserve those for later, but because it's only a class 3 alarm and it's just shadows, it's actually pretty easy to finish all the scans before most of the enemies get to you. Once you finish this alarm though, you're then going to want to go to the western blood door to zone 275. This door is going to have a full team scan tied to it that you have to do first, and then you can open up the blood door, and the blood door itself I believe will spawn in shadow type enemies, and the first room of zone 275 is filled with a lot of enemies, specifically shadows and shadow giants. Highly recommend place that sentry down, don't be afraid to fall back a bit because there are a lot of enemies you're going to have to fight because of this blood door, and since they are shadow type enemies, if you're not running thermal weapons, you're going to have to wait between those biotracker cooldowns as they won't be able to keep the enemies tagged 24/7. But once you've dealt with all of the shadows from this blood door, you can then go into the first room. Zone 275 itself will have no resources whatsoever, so you're just going to make your way into the second room. It is an open room divider, be aware of that, and beyond that room divider will be more shadows and shadow giants. I would recommend try to melee as much as you can, but if you need to, go on ahead and pull the room and utilize the sentry. At this point, you are more than likely running really low on resources, but don't worry, that is normal, unless if you're running provisions or something. Once everything in the zone has been dealt with though, you go to the far southwestern corner of it where you find a security door to zone 276. This door is going to have a full team scan. Now, as for Zone 276 itself, this zone will consist of 2 fairly big rooms. And between these 2 rooms are going to be 2 Charger Scouts patrolling about, Chargers and even Giant Chargers, and I think a few regular Strikers and Shooters here and there. Now, on your average run, when you get into the zone, you are going to be incredibly low on ammunition, which is fine. You just want to sneak your way through the zone, being very careful because it is Chargers and a pitch black zone, so hard to see them. But you want to make your way through the first room, just clearing out some of the enemies with melee best you can. If there is a Charger Scout or 2 in here, use C-foam grenades or your C-foam launcher to deal with them, and look around for boxes and lockers to try to get a little bit of ammunition. That way, if you do accidentally wake up enemies or wake up the scout, you have a decent chance of survival as you now have some ammunition you can fight back with. But once you clear out everything inside the first room, or at least everything you feel like you have to clear out, you can then go into the second room of the zone and do the same thing again. Clear out some of the enemies or sneak past them. The terminal is at the far southern end of that second room up above, so you can use that to ping any resources that are left over in here. And of course, you also need to find the 4th and final power cell, which will be located inside of this zone. Once you have all the resources from in here, which at this point you should actually have every single resource pack throughout the entirety of the level, which if you don't, I recommend backtrack to whatever zone the resources are in and grab them real quick, because once you get the 4th power cell, you go back into zone 271, you plug it in. This will end the blackout, so lights come back on, no alarm or anything like that. But now you will be able to put a command into the nearby terminal, which once you do that, it will initiate the final part of the level, which preparation for that is making sure all the resource packs throughout the level have been collected and utilized. And then as you can see with this map overlay, for this final alarm, most part you're just going to be dealing with regular Strikers and Shooters, but there will be a few other special enemies, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But these enemies can spawn from all 4 directions. Now, when it comes to the west and to the east, there's not really anything you can do. There are no doors you can utilize, but because we have been saving the northern and southern doors, we can go on ahead, shut, mine, and C-foam the 1 northern door, and then shut, mine, and C-foam the 2 southern doors. And then any leftover mines, feel free to place them pretty much anywhere throughout the room, near the open security doors or wherever, just ideally in a place where enemies will actually pass through it. C-foam, if you want to, you can also place that near the security doors, or you can just keep it near you, as you will be holding out sort of in the middle of the room. And then sentry, you can position it pretty much wherever you want to, or keep it nearby. That way you can quickly pick it up and reposition it, depending on exactly where the wave of enemy spawns from. Once you've gotten everything set up though, and you are good to go, you are then going to put the command to the terminal, and this will initiate a full zone alarm. Throughout this alarm, like I said, mostly going to be regular Strikers and Shooters, but a few Nightmares can spawn in, some regular Chargers and Giant Chargers can also spawn in, and specifically with the full zone alarm, a tank will also spawn in somewhere, although sometimes the tank actually takes quite a while to show up and you won't see them until after you finish the full zone alarm. Once the full zone alarm initiates though, a gigantic full team scan will appear in the room. It's not the entirety of the room though, so you are being forced towards the middle of the room a little bit more, but you will still have some wiggle room. So during this full team alarm, it's going to be the same type of enemies, although now a Snatcher is going to be spawning in, although sometimes the Snatcher is weird and he actually doesn't even show up at all. I've had a few runs where I've completed the level before I even see him, but do be aware there is a Snatcher. There's also that tank, which by this point should appear somewhere in the room, and I highly recommend during this full team scan, get rid of that tank. Even if you need to step out of the scan for a little bit, I highly recommend you do, because you do not want him to be alive when you have to deal with the 3rd and final scan. Which, speaking of that, once you finish that gigantic full team scan, you now have a smaller full team scan, which is right at the middle of the room, and you're going to have to stay here for a little bit, defending against all those enemies from before, as well as 2 more Snatchers who will spawn in. Thankfully though, just like the other Snatcher, there's a pretty good chance that you will finish this final scan before those 2 Snatchers even show up, so they're not even much of a threat. The biggest threat just being that tank if he is still alive, as well as any Giant Chargers or enemies who are really close by. But this is a final bit of the level. All you have to do is just hold out on this final scan, and once you get it to 100%, you're done actually. There's no running to extraction or anything. Shortly after that scan finishes, you will get your completion screen, and with that, you have completed R8C2. And that's all there is to it. R8C2 shows that this was indeed the group here who was communicating and helping out the other squad for the first half of Rundown 8. Funny that it was another version of us from a different dimension the entire time, and not a group of other prisoners or researchers like we originally speculated. However, with some of these questions being answered, there are still multiple unanswered questions that still need to be solved. What happened to the other Schaeffer back in R8D1? Why did we decide to betray ourselves at the end of R8E1? And what's going to happen between us and our Schaeffer now that we've rebelled against him and unplugged ourselves from the system? As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope that I was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this mission. If you have any tips or tricks to this level that you want to share, any questions for me, or you just have something in general that you'd like to say, please do let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and if you want to join my community, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other links you might be interested in. Among those links being one to the official GTFO merch store, which, as always, I highly recommend you check out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast and you're looking to pick up some sweet merch. Until next time, Schaeffer may no longer have control over us, but he's still in command of the Biocom and Warden systems, so we might want to prepare for some upcoming retribution. But hopefully, I'll see all you wonderful people in the next video.